Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and I am here today to talk to you about the Spirit of Yorkshire Filey Bay IPA Finish. IPA Finish. Beer, yes. Very unusual. You don't often find kind of beer cask finishes, maturations, IPA. There is one or two. Glenfiddich had an IPA cask, but it's unusual to find one. And the main reason that you have this from Filey Bay is because the Spirit of Yorkshire distillery is owned and founded by the owner of the Wold brewery, which is literally 5 miles up the road. So to explain that history and also explain the kind of convoluted way that they've managed to do this IPA finish, which is actually very interesting and pretty unique. Nobody else can do this because there isn't actually anywhere that I know of, and please in comments you put me wrong if there is, a distillery and brewery that are so closely interlinked that enables them to do what they have done for this bottle. So let me tell you about that before I tell you what it tastes like.
The Spirit of Yorkshire distillery was founded in 2016 by Tom Mellor and David Thompson. Tom was an arable farmer who set up the Wold brewery in 2013 and already had ideas about opening a whisky distillery in conjunction, and so partnered with long-standing friend and marketing expert David to set up the new Spirit venture. The barley used for both beer and whisky production is grown on Tom's own fields, with milling, mashing and fermentation taking place at the brewery 4.5 miles away from the distillery itself. If the distillery was in Scotland, this would not be allowed due to Scotch Whisky Association regulations. In planning the distillery, Tom and David enlisted the help of legendary distillery consultant Jim Swan, who was well known around the world for assisting new distilleries such as Cavallan, Kilchoman, Penderyn and Lindores Abbey before his untimely death in 2017. The house style will ultimately be akin to the likes of Glenlivet, fruit-forward but somewhat delicate in body. The master distiller is a young man named Joe Clark. Joe's first job in the whisky industry was as a part-timer in the York branch of the Whisky Shop, at that time managed by none other than yours truly. His passion and enthusiasm was obvious from the very start, and he has worked tirelessly to ensure the early spirit releases from the distillery, under the brand name of Filey Bay, are of the highest quality. However, as is a legal requirement whenever I discuss Joe, I am obliged to show you this picture of Joe with our good friend Ollie Chilton of the Whisky Exchange during a trip to Islay. Feel free to ask him about the long hair, it's quite the story. In addition to 2 copper pot stills, a directional arm can connect to a 4-plate column still, which enables them to play around with reflux and redistillation. Maturation takes place principally in first fill ex-bourbon casks from Old Forester, although plenty of experimentation has been done with other cask types and finishing. Indeed, the current core range features a finish using Muscatel wine casks and an STR ex-Rioja cask finish. STR, or shaved, toasted and recharred, is a signature of Jim Swan's legacy. Filey Bay Flagship, however, can be seen as the key introduction to the Filey Bay flavour profile, with light, fruity and creamy notes throughout. Unlike other recent new whisky distilleries across the UK, Spirit of Yorkshire never had any intention to delve into the massive gin or growing rum market, which would have given them an early and potentially lucrative revenue stream. The only concession they've made was the release of a whisky and malt spirit cream liqueur at the end of 2020, allowing visitors to their distillery who didn't drink whisky the chance to still appreciate their output. Filey Bay IPA Finish has a somewhat convoluted process to get to bottle, but it does exemplify the close connection between the distillery and its sister brewery. Barrels that previously held Filey Bay Flagship whisky were filled with Wold Scarborough Fair IPA beer that rested in casks for 9 months. To the team's surprise, the beer went into cask at an ABV of 5.1%, but came out at a higher strength of 9.6%, and you can find this beer bottled as Barrel Wave IPA. On the very same day the beer was disgorged from the casks, whisky aged around 4 years old, that otherwise would have become Flagship, was refilled into them and left for 6 months to marry the influence of the ale. Whilst there is not a denoted number of bottles, this release has been designated as batch number 1, and it's bottled at an ABV of 46%.
Right then, so did that all make sense? I hope so, because when I was writing out the kind of script for me to do the voiceover, it was a bit like, does this make sense? So that goes in there, and then it goes out there, and then that goes in there, and it's all a bit like, okay, but actually, you know, as I said earlier, it kind of evidences the way that they can intertwine the brewery and the distillery so closely. So I was very fortunate to have a sample bottle. So if you are in the shop and you would like to try this, you are more than welcome to. So there is no limited edition bottles. It does say batch number 1. on the label, which indicates that they may well do a batch 2. Bottled at 46% as standard, and the standard price, same prices as the rest of the finishes that they do. Now, what I will say is, and I have just done a video for the Sherry Cask Reserve, is I'm going to put a picture up now that has got my shelf of Filey Bay. It's starting to get to the stage, Joe, where there is sort of a little bit too many. Just slow down a bit. Just kind of calm down, slow down, because I'm aware that there is potentially another finish that's supposed to come out. It's amazing to be able to show how diverse the Filey Bay range can be and what you can do with essentially the same base spirit. You've got the Flagship as the core, and then you've got your STR, your wine casks, you've got beer casks, sort of. You've got your muscatel and all this lot, but it's just starting to get a little bit too many. And I can only fit so many on the shelf. Admittedly, half the shelf is taken up with those experience packs, but it is one of those where they kind of just need to calm down and streamline it a little bit, because it's getting a little bit complicated. And as a retailer, and this is being absolutely brutally honest to Joe, because he's a good friend of mine, and I think he will listen to what I've got to say and not immediately dismiss it. But as a retailer, sometimes you can have too many in a range from a particular distillery. Bruichladdich were guilty of it a few years ago. Kilchoman were another one where it was a relatively new distillery. They were banging loads of different versions out, and everybody just got confused. The English whiskey, to be fair, did it. And I can remember being in a meeting with David Phipp, who is the head distiller, and he said, when we first launched, and this was like before he started with them, he said we had too many. Nobody knew what the fuck was going on. And that was his words, because he swears like a sailor. He said nobody knew what was going on. There were too many numbers, too many additions, too many X, Y, and Z, and we had to streamline it and go, right, what do we want to focus on? And my fear is that Joe and Spirit Yorkshire and the team have just kind of reached that point where there's slightly too many. And if I was in their shoes, I would be looking at their range and going, okay, let's streamline it. Let's maybe kind of like look at doing a core range of the finishes and actually using some where we do them a bit more limited edition as limited runs, because they're all brilliant. I mean, this is the thing. It's not like there's any duds in them, but you are naturally geared to go towards the favourites. And as a retailer, there is only so much space I have on my shelf to be able to then go, right, I've got this entire range. They're not all selling at the same time. They do sell, you know, they do kind of like trickle out, but is there some of that shelf space that I could put something else in that is actually going to sell at a faster rate? So it might be that I might have to look at, or it is literally like I've got a shelf full of Filey Bay. I just want one shelf of Filey Bay. I don't want to start going into the rest of the shelves, because then I don't want to split up that display. You've just brought another one out. I literally don't have room for it. I physically do not have room for that particular release. So I either don't get it, or once I've sold through one of the others, I don't bring that back in because I physically don't have enough space. So that is an honest critique of where they are at the moment. The whiskies that they are producing are brilliant, and that's why at the moment I've got all of them in. But I have now got to the stage where I physically can't put any more on the shelf. I am literally keeping it to that shelf, and that is going to be Filey Bay, and that's it. So if any more come out, I'm either not going to get them in, or something else has got to go. So it's just kind of like, that's where we are. And it's kind of a marketing thing, and I absolutely don't blame them for doing it, because it's evidencing what they're capable of producing, fantastic whiskies of various styles to suit almost every particular type of flavour profile. You've got peated, you've got IPA, you've got muscatel, you've got STR. But as a retailer, logistically, it's just kind of pushing it too far where something's got to give. Anyway, outside of that, IPA Finish. Now, IPA as a beer, I drink beer, I like beer. I'm not obviously as into it as spirits because I don't sell beer in the shop. If I was into beer as much as I'm into spirits, I would have beer in it, but I don't. So I do drink beer. I tend to err more towards lagers than big heavy beers, but I do like trying loads and loads of different beers. But IPA as a kind of genre, category of beer, is one that I struggle with more than anything else, because it can either be quite soft and easy drinking and lagery, or it can go quite sour You kind of get like that sour hop, sometimes grapefruit, that sort of thing. And I really, at one point I thought I don't like IPA. Then I started to have some others, IPAs, because if there is an IPA in a pub, that's the one I tend to go for, just to try it, just to see if I've kind of like find ones that I do like. So there are some IPAs, I can't remember the names, that I've actually gone, this is really, really nice, I really enjoy it. But others can be quite tart, can be quite sour, and I really, really struggle with them. So when it was an IPA Finish Filey Bay, it was like, oh, is this kind of, you know, is this going to be that sour route? Is it going to work for me personally with the whiskey itself? So on the nose, you get that classic, and I can't believe we're already saying classic style of Filey Bay, but you get that light lemon, light creaminess from the bourbon casks. But what you also get is a slight biscuity note. And what this really reminds me of on the nose is lemon cream puff biscuits. And I'm going to put a picture up of what that is, because you might never have heard of it, or it might be called something completely different where you are. But it's like a flaky pastry biscuit, and then there's a cream filling in the middle of it. So it's like a sandwich biscuit with a cream, but it's like lemon flavored cream with this light kind of puff pastry biscuity on either side. And it really reminds me of that. Now I'm starting to get a little bit of hoppiness coming through. That kind of slightly vegetal, slightly sweet hop feel. You know how you kind of like, if you're doing a brewery tour, and sometimes, you know, not when you're kind of in the center of the brewery, but when you're kind of outside walking towards the building, you get that waft of like slightly sweet hops coming through. Start to get that. It's not overpowering, but it's there, but it's working with that citrusy feel, working with that creaminess. It's lovely and light and fragrant, and it's obvious that it's there. There is that definite note of beer, lager is involved somewhere. You know, it's clear that there is some kind of element in there, which is good, because it's not like we're calling it an IPA finish and it just noses exactly the same as our standard one. So on the palate, and everything that's on the nose absolutely follows through. If anything, it's slightly warmer. So you really do get that lemon cream puff pastry biscuit element. There's that slight hoppiness. There is a slight, ever so slight tinge of a warm, rich beer right at the end, but it doesn't detract. I've had, what was it? Grant's ale cask. Admittedly, it was years ago, but I can still remember trying it, because my overriding feel when I tried that was I'd had a glass of beer and I'd left essentially the dregs at the bottom. So you know when you get the dregs of a beer and there's that little bit of liquid, little bit of foam, it's a little bit kind of warm as well, and then you put a shot of bog standard Grant's in it and kind of swill it around and then drink it. It was not pleasant, it wasn't balanced. This has that beery element, but it's subdued and it's not getting in the way. It actually works brilliantly with that citrusy, fresh, crisp, kind of like light, delicate feel of the whiskey itself. It's really, really good. It's really good. It's not a sour IPA at all. It's warm. It's got a lovely mouthfeel that, weirdly, it feels richer than it actually is. Very, very hard for me to describe this, but I can feel it in my mouth, but it feels like it's expanding even though it actually isn't. It's lovely and warm. It's got this kind of rich depth, which weirdly none, like standard Flagship doesn't have. It's taking that kind of light citrusy feel and adding weight and richness and sort of expanding it, almost like it's kind of like blowing up an inflatable. You know, you've got that core of that house style of flavour, and then it's kind of like making it richer and fuller somehow, but still keeping the essence of the house style alive. It's so good. It really is. Now, I've had a few people say this is absolutely their favourite. It is up there. It really is good. And this is one of the problems now of having such a range, is now you're almost subconsciously ranking them by going, oh, that's my favourite, then that one, then that one, then that one. And there was always going to be one bottom of the pile. And that's going to change between everybody. But I subconsciously, naturally, will have an order now of the, what have we got now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 finishes, but then I've got 2 Muscatels, which are slightly different. We've got the Yorkshire Day, we've got the Sherry Cask Reserve. So I'm now subconsciously, even though I'm trying not to, ranking them in terms of, oh, that one, that one, that one. And then there's like a worst one. But is that the one that I pull out when I have to make some more space for whatever comes in next? But this is really, really good. This is really good. If you like beer, you're going to like this. If you like whiskey, you're going to like this. I'm very intrigued to try this, and some of you are going to absolutely just keel over in shock. I'm going to try this in a cocktail because I think there is something in there that will actually work in a interesting type of cocktail, and it's going to be a bit of an odd one. Maybe something like a Clover Club, but with whiskey. And some of you are going absolutely apoplectic. I'm sure about that. Not bothered. Don't care. That's your problem. I like making cocktails with whiskey, and I like making cocktails with good whiskey. Because if you're going to do a good cocktail, use good ingredients. But that's got some versatility in it, I think. So I'm going to have a little bit of a play around with it. But if you are wanting a bottle, and I highly recommend it, it is available through the website, www.spiritspecialist.com. Or if you can make it into the shop, I have a sample bottle. So you are more than welcome to try it before you buy it. That is me done. I shall see you at the next video. Cheers.
Right then, little bonus, because I completely forgot when I did the IPA finish that I'd actually got given a bottle of Barrel Wave from Morgan, very kindly, so that I could actually try it at the same time as trying the whiskey, and then I forgot I'd had this in the fridge. So we'll do a little quick tasting of it now. So I shall try and open it without spilling it, and I'm just going to pour a little bit because I'm actually going to save this for later on, because I haven't actually opened the shop yet, so it's in the morning and it's a little bit early to be drinking 9.1% beer. So this was the Barrel Wave that I mentioned earlier. So this is the Scarborough Fair IPA that's been put into the Spirit of Yorkshire whiskey casks for 9 months and then come out. So it's gone in at about 5 point something percent. Or was it 5 point? I wrote it down and I've thrown a bit of paper away. I think it was 5.6% and it's come out at 9.1. So bonus beer tasting review thing. So on the nose, it's nice and citrusy and quite like, again, that lemoniness comes through. So I'm wondering if it's, now I've not had Scarborough Fair IPA, so I don't know what flavour profile that's got to start with, but that sort of lemon, almost lemon meringue pie feel actually reminds me quite a lot of that lemon cream feel that comes through on the Flagship. Okay. Quite creamy, quite rich, quite a full mouthfeel. There's quite a rich, creamy mouthfeel to this. It's light, that lemon feel comes through. The lemon element's not as intense on the palate as it is on the nose, but it's still there. But it's quite rich and full. That mouthfeel really surprises me. And for 9.1%, this is dangerously drinkable. It doesn't feel particularly powerful for a strong beer. It's, kind of like that lagery, light, fresh, delicate texture. Not sure I'd want to drink this warm. The warmer it gets, I can imagine that rich creaminess will start to feel a bit thick and maybe a little bit kind of like, not gunky, but it will start to feel a bit heavy. So you kind of need to keep this chilled, I think. But it's incredibly drinkable. It's light, it's fresh, it would be absolutely fantastic. Ideally on a beach, given what's on there, on a beach on a summer's day. This would go really well with food as well, I reckon. I think with kind of a light chicken dish or a light fish dish or something like that, or a barbecue as well, but like barbecue chicken, barbecue salmon, that sort of thing. It's actually much lighter than I was expecting it to be, considering the strength, and also an IPA, which again I tend to associate with more slightly sour flavours, and this doesn't have it. This has got a nice light citrusy feel. It's very, very, very drinkable indeed. I shall put the rest of that in the fridge and leave it for when I finish work, because that is going to go down an absolute treat. So Morgan, thank you for sending the bottle. That's what the Barrel Wave IPA tastes like. And that is what influences then the IPA finish. And there is certainly elements in there that kind of like creamy, lemon cream, that biscuity note that's in there, that slight hoppiness, what's in the beer very much comes through on the whiskey, and it absolutely does kind of influence what has gone into the kind of like those subtle flavour profiles that's then gone into that whiskey to do the IPA finish. I do think actually it almost like needs to be sold as a pack. You know, get the bottle, get 4 bottles of beer or 6 bottles or something like that as a gift pack, which had like the beer and the whiskey together would be ideal. I'd love to do a tasting with the local beer shop down the road, but unfortunately Wold Top haven't been particularly forthcoming with getting in touch to be able to supply them with the beer. So if anybody from Wold Top's listening, can you get your finger out and get in touch with the Hop Cavern, and then the both of us can do a beer and whiskey tasting that we've been talking about doing for ages. But aside from that, cracking beer. Really, really like it. One of the IPAs that goes to my list of yes, very, very tasty indeed. So that's done. That's the little bonus for you. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.